Hey everybody, welcome to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com and here on my YouTube channel. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a mixing template from scratch in PreSonus Studio One version 4. I get lots of questions about this, and I'm going to break this up into two videos. This video is going to be for the absolute beginner, someone new to Studio One that just wants to set up a basic mixing template and kind of show you how I go through that process and give you some thoughts on why I do this and how I do it and so on and so forth. And then there's going to be a second video where I'm going to show you a little bit more of an advanced template based on the fact that I'm doing some analog summing and using some hardware, and I'm going to show you a little bit more advanced way of setting up a template and show you all the routing and all that stuff. So that'll be in a separate video. So in this video, we're going to start off with a basic mixing template. So if we open up Studio One, here we are at the start page here. So the best way to do this, if you've never done this before, is you're going to create yourself a brand new song file, and we're going to set that up from scratch as a template. So the way you do that is you come over here to create new song, and we're just going to use an empty song for now, okay? And we're going to title it template. Okay, we'll say template 2018 just for a name, and then we're going to put this on my desktop for now just to keep things simple, but you can put this anywhere you want. So we're going to put a song file called mix or template 2018 out on my desktop. We're going to choose our sample rate and such. Usually I would set it to 48K, but if you set your sample rate here, your resolution is typically going to be 24-bit for me, 48K 24-bit. I'm going to leave the time-based in seconds for now. This is your timeline and your edit screen. How do you want to see it? Do you want to see it in seconds, samples, bars, frames? However you want to see it is fine. The song length, we're going to kind of leave that alone at its default. The tempo, we're going to leave it 120 beats per minute, and I'm going to leave it at a 4/4 time signature for now. So this is pretty basic. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit OK. And it is going to open, if I hit OK, it's going to open a blank screen here. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a template from scratch. So now when I'm thinking about a template, and depending on what you use your session for, what you're going to be using your DAW for, if you're doing some recording or if you're doing mixing, it'll all depend on how you set up your template. And what you'll find is that if you're going to have a template maybe for just recording, you'll also have a template maybe for mixing. Because primarily what I do is I do mixing and mastering. I'm going to set up a mixing template, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up my browser here on the right-hand side. For a second, we're going to go to our effects tab because I'm going to put some predetermined plugins that I know that I use in every single mix. I'm going to kind of set that up as a way for me to already have it loaded. So every time I load up a new session, it's going to have a specific set of plugins already kind of on the different tracks. So for example, I'm going to open up my mixer here, and on my main output here, I know that I'm going to use the same kind of plugins on my mix bus for almost every single mix. Now they may change slightly, but let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to come over to my main output here, okay? And I'm going to go down to Slate Digital, and I'm going to use my first plugin that I'm going to put on my master bus. Typically will always be the Virtual Console Collection by Slate Digital. Let it load up here. And templates are a great way to really speed up your workflow. Once you have a template, you can get up and running very quickly, and you don't need to continue to do this every single time you load up a session. Okay, so I know that on my master bus, my first plugin is always going to be the Virtual Console Collection by Slate Digital, and I'm going to put the mix bus part of the plugin on here, okay? Now I'm typically never gonna group the I/O and such. I don't typically do that, and I don't typically have noise reduction on. And I'm gonna kind of leave it like this because I know every mix with this particular plugin, I have several different consoles I can choose from. I can set the particulars of the plugin depending on the mix, but I know I'm going to have that as my first plugin, so I'm going to leave that there. My second plugin on my master bus is typically always going to be a compressor of some kind. Now again, every mix might change a little bit, but I know there's typically on my master bus one of a few different compressors that I'll use. So what I use on my master bus typically is the Slate Digital Virtual Bus Compressor rack, or the VBC. So I'm going to put that on here. And this particular plugin has 3 different compressors in one. It has the FG Gray, which is an SSL emulation. It has the FG Red here in the center, which is the Focusrite hardware emulation. And then the FG Mu. So we have 3 separate compressors, and depending on the mix, I might use one or the other. So what I'll do is I'll just turn them all off for now manually. And then during the mix, depending on what I'm going to be mixing, I can turn on whatever compressor I want to use for that particular mix. Or I can also turn on a couple of them, set them up similarly, and I can bypass one compressor to another, A/B them, to see what works on that particular mix. Now I have one compressor or 3 different compressors and one plugin on my master bus. Now, typically after that, I'll probably have some kind of an EQ, and I don't always use the EQ on the master bus. It really depends on the mix itself, but I like to have an EQ ready to go. And depending on the plugins that you have, it could be any EQ, same thing with the compressor. But for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put one of my favorite EQs for nice gentle EQ moves, and that is gonna be the Pro Q by FabFilter. So I'm gonna put that on there, and I'm just gonna leave that there. And then last but not least, typically what I'll have is I'll have some kind of tape emulation. So again, I tend to use the Slate Digital tape more than anything else. I'm going to put the Slate Digital tape machine there. I know it's going to be on the 1/2" 2-track setting. Typically, I'm going to use it on 15 IPS per second, and I'm going to kind of just, again, set that here. So now I have my master bus set up, okay? Now, also I know during the courses of my mix, and again, it'll all depend on how many tracks I import into my session from different clients. Every session will be a little bit different, but I always know that I'm gonna have some kind of a busing system where all my individual tracks or my groupings of individual tracks are gonna go to some kind of a busing system. Typically, it's gonna be laid out something as follows: a drum bus, a bass bus, maybe a percussion bus, a guitar bus, a keyboards bus would be 5, maybe a lead vocal bus, and maybe some background vocal bus. So maybe 7 buses. If you tend to work with horns or something a lot, maybe an 8th bus. So I want to have 8 buses already set up, ready to go. So when I import my audio, the buses are already there. So the way to do that is if you open up the mixer here in Studio One, I'm just going to right click here and I'm going to say add a bus channel. Okay, and I'm going to duplicate that, say 7 more times here. So I'm just going to say add bus channel. And there might be ways to do this more than one at a time, but so here's 6, 7, 8. Okay, and I'm going to name these, which are pretty typical for me. So the first one might be drum bus. The second one might be a bass bus. The third one might be a guitar bus. The fourth one might be a keyboard bus. The fifth one might be horns, horn bus. The 6th one might be percussion bus. 7th will be lead vocal, lead vox bus. And the 8th will be a background vocal bus. Or maybe I would have 2 maybe background vocal bus 1, background vocal bus 2, but you get the idea. And every mix, again, will change a little bit. So what I may end up doing is I may end up tweaking this a little bit and adding or removing some buses depending on the mix, but I have the basic framework there. I'm also going to make sure that my routing of my buses are all going to my main output, which they are, my master bus, which is great. And I'm going to color code them in a way that makes sense to me. And typically I like my buses to be kind of this color here, okay? So I got my buses all set up. The other thing I'm going to do is I know I'm going to have some reverbs, some delays. I'm going to have some kind of effects in my mix. Again, don't know exactly how many reverbs and delays, but I'm going to preload those already here. So I'm going to add myself some effects channels here. I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, let's say 4 to start. And I might label, I'm going to color code those a different color, the color that I like to use for my effects. Oops, I'm going to highlight this properly over here. And I'm going to color code these, maybe this color. That's kind of what I like to do for my effects. And then maybe I'll put, you know, maybe a delay here. I know I'm going to do a verb or reverb 1, or maybe it's not reverb 1. Maybe it's a room reverb. Maybe it's a plate reverb. Maybe it's a hall reverb. Okay, something like that. There we go. And now I'm going to go ahead in their effects. I'm going to make sure they're in solo safe by holding my shift key and clicking on the solo button. We want to make sure that these, again, are routed to the proper place. These are typically going to be routed to the buses, but depending on your bus structure for each individual mix, it may be change a little. So for now, I'm just going to leave that routed to the mains. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put some plugins on there that I typically use. And what you'll find is after you've been mixing for a while, you have a lot of go-tos, a lot of go-to plugins. Like for delay, I have several delays in my arsenal, but I know that I'm typically more times than not, I'm going to use the Soundtoys Echo Boy. That's one of my favorite delays. So I'm just going to drop that on my delay bus here, or my delay effects channel. Oh, I highlighted them all, so it's gonna populate all of them. We didn't want to do that, so let me just remove them from the last three here because we only want it on the first one. Okay. Now for reverbs, again, I'm going to have, say, a small room reverb, maybe a plate and a hall reverb. Again, you can use three different types of plugins if you wanted to, but I tend to lean towards this Slate Digital Verb Suites Classics because they have great presets for all three. And then what I'll do is I'll put them on each track and just leave it in its default mode. Now you can also do this with just standard stock plugins. I'm just showing you third-party plugins, but you can do this with standard stock plugins. Okay, now on my buses, I also know that on my buses, I'm going to start off with the Virtual Console collection like we did on the Master Bus by Slate Digital. So again, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to preload my buses. I'm going to put the Mix Bus part of the plugin on here. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to leave it in its default mode. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that on all of my buses because I know that's always going to be the first plugin on my buses. How I set up the plugin will change from mix to mix, but that's okay. Okay. And that's my basic structure on how I set up a template. I said, okay, this is going to be my bare bones. Now, when I import my audio files, every mix is going to change, and therefore I'm going to color code and do things differently. But I know I'm going to have a busing system. I know I'm going to have some effects, reverbs, and delays. I also know more times than not I'm going to have some parallel compression tracks, which I have a whole course on parallel compression over at homerecordingmadeeasy.com called The Power of Parallel Compression. You should check out that course. It'll change the way you mix forever, I promise. Shameless plug. But even anyway, we're going to put some parallel compression tracks. Now, typically, my parallel compression tracks mirror my busing system. So if I have 8 buses, I'm going to have 8 parallel tracks. So right next to my effects, I'm going to add another 8 buses here. I'm going to add 8 more buses. And I'm going to name them accordingly. I'm going to color code them accordingly. 5, 6. Move this over. Hope we got 6, 7. Okay, one more. Add a bus channel 8. I'm going to color code these the color purple because that's what I like for my color scheme. And if you don't have a color scheme of your own, you should develop one so the tracks are always the same color every single time so you can find them easily on your screen. Now my first one's going to be called P drums, meaning parallel compression for drums. And I'm going to follow the same order as I did for my buses down here, right? So I went drums, bass, guitar. So I'm going to do P drums, P bass, P guitar, P keys, P horns, P percussion, P lead vocal, and the last one, P background vocal. Okay? So now I have all those things labeled and named accordingly. Okay, so this is how I set up my basic structure. So once, and again, I wouldn't typically put too many plugins on here because they change from mix to mix. But however, let's say I always use the same kind of compressors on my parallel compression drum track. Which honestly, a lot of times I do. I'll use the Universal Audio 1176. So I would come over to the Universal Audio 1176 and I would put that plugin on here. Okay, if I could find it. So here we go. So I make sure I put that plugin on here, and that's typically what I would use when I do parallel compression for drums. If I wanted to switch between a couple of different compressors, and let's say there's 2 or 3 different types that you would use depending on the mix, you can preload each one of these tracks with all the effects that you may use and just turn them on and off as need be. Once I get to this stage, now I'm ready to save this as a template. So once you've kind of preloaded and set up all your tracks and your effects and maybe your parallel compression and set up your master bus and set up your preliminary plugins, you come up to the top here at Studio One where it says File and you go Save as Template. and you're going to get a Save as Template dialog box. And you can name it, and we can name this mixing template 2018, and then there's a description where I would put something like 2018 mixing, you know, with plugins or something like that, with plugs or something like that, to remind me, because as you set up different templates, you want to be pretty descriptive of what this template is, so when you go to your template list over time, you can easily find it. Once you hit OK, it's going to save it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this, okay? And we're going to go back, we're going to save this, we'll say yes, we're going to save it. We're going to come back to the start page. Okay, I've closed that now. So now when we go to create a new song, here's our template right here. Under the user tab, you'll see right here, 2018, mixing template 2018, and the description is it's a mixing template with plugins. Then I'm going to name my song, I'm going to choose my location, just like I did before. So this is a brand new song, we can say test. I'm going to put it out on my desktop again just for simplicity for this demonstration. I'm going to leave everything else the same. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to take a couple of seconds to load up on my other screen here. It's actually loading all the plugins. You can see it here. It's loading up everything. And here's our template. So now you can see that we have all our plugins on our master bus. We have all of our busing systems set up, our parallel compression tracks, our effects tracks with all the plugins on there. And now you're ready to go. Now you can just import your audio and you can go ahead and you can save all that time. Now this video is probably what, 10 minutes long? So we saved about 10 minutes at the beginning of your session just setting up the basic bare bones. And this is a pretty bare bones template. What some people will also do is they'll add a bunch of audio tracks here with nothing on them, and they'll just drag and drop audio onto those tracks, which you can do. In other words, they may add a couple of audio tracks here. They may say add an audio track here, and they may call this kick drum. And they may add, 8 tracks for the drums and 3 tracks for guitars and 2 tracks for bass. And then when they go to import their audio from the browser, they just drag it in 1 track at a time. I don't typically like to do that because my sessions range so much in the instrumentation that I find that it's easier for me to not add any tracks up front, the audio itself, just drag all the files in, and then I could color code them and I can route them to my buses, route them to my effects like that. But you can make your template as complex or as simple as you want. So again, I'm going to remove this. This is a mixing template. However, you can also have one for recording where you have a bunch of tracks already set up that are already record enabled, where all the routing is set up properly to the proper inputs on your interface. So all you have to do is open up your session, plug in your instrument to your interface, and you can start recording right away. And you don't have to do a lot of this setup work. You can just open up a template and start creating right away. So this is the basic template and how you create a template in PreSonus Studio One. I'd love to know below in the comments how you set up your templates and what ideas you have. You can do this in any DAW. They're all done pretty much the same way. And if you come back next time for the next video, I'm going to show you a more advanced template where we're routing audio in and out of the interface going through hardware, and it's a little bit more involved than this template. This is more of the basic template. So I hope you liked this video. Please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell. Also go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Get your 5 free mixing training courses just by hitting the orange button on the front of homerecordingmadeeasy.com right on the homepage. Get 5 free courses worth about $110 in value, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.